Hello, friends. The year was 1914. The date was November 4th. A British ship, Endurance, cutting through fierce waves and stormy seas, was moving toward the most mysterious and dangerous landmass in the world, Antarctica. On this ship were 28 brave men, commanded by a stubborn explorer, Sir Ernest Shackleton. His dream was so daring that just hearing it gives goosebumps to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot. Imagine a time with no smartphones, no GPS, no modern technology, just human courage, icy winds, and bone-crushing cold of -50 degrees Celsius. The plan was to take the ship through the Weddell Sea to the Antarctic coast. From there, land on the ice, cross the South Pole on foot, and reach the Ross Sea. The total journey was about 2,900 kilometers. It was estimated to be completed in 120 days if everything went according to plan. But friends, that is where the real mystery begins. A plan never works on the ground the way it looks on paper. What these brave travelers faced ahead is difficult even to imagine. On November 5, 1914, the ship reached a whaling station on South Georgia Island. This was the place beyond which human settlements ended. On the map, this island lies near the tip of South America, and just below it spreads the Antarctic Peninsula. Connected to it is the Weddell Sea, a marine region surrounded on three sides by Antarctic ice. Because of this, the ice here does not easily break apart and escape, and the entire area remains covered by a thick, permanent sheet of ice. That day, the weather was extremely bad. Conditions in the Weddell Sea were terrifying for any ship. Local people warned Shackleton, postpone the mission, otherwise this journey will be an invitation to death. But Shackleton stood firm in his stubbornness. There was only one passion in his voice. We didn't come here to stop. We have to move forward. And on December 5, 1914, Endurance once again began its journey, slicing through icy winds. But friends, soon the thing they feared most happened. The ice in the Weddell Sea was nothing like Shackleton had imagined. It was many times thicker, stronger, and more ruthless. So his determination did not break. On January 18, 1915, after crawling along the edge of the ice for many days, Endurance finally became completely trapped between massive ice formations. Within a few days, the crew spotted a crack about 15 feet long in the frozen ice nearly 50 yards from the ship. This was the only hope. For 3 full hours, the engine was run at full speed. The ship was shaken violently in an attempt to free it, but Endurance did not move even an inch. Exhausted crew members went out with axes and chisels to cut the ice, but the ice was so hard that every blow proved useless. The problems did not end there. The ice sheet that had imprisoned the ship began drifting slowly farther away from the Antarctic landmass. The place where the crew had planned to land, Weddell Bay, was now 60 miles away. Between them lay freezing ocean water, preventing travel on foot, and on the other side the ship was locked in rigid ice. It was a trap with no visible escape. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Antarctic winter was approaching, meaning months of complete darkness, 24 hours without sunlight, bone-breaking cold, and deadly storms. Shackleton ordered that everyone would spend the winter inside the ship, but as temperatures dropped, pressure from the ice increased. Endurance's wooden walls began to groan. During this time, the ship's photographer, Frank Hurley, took several photographs. In those images, it was clearly visible that the ice was crushing the ship from all sides, like the jaws of a predator. September 30, 1915. Deep cracks appeared along the sides of the ship, yet the crew still hoped for a miracle. Then came the evening of October 24th at 6:45 p.m. Suddenly, a thunderous cracking sound echoed as massive ice pressure caused a huge block of ice to break and crash onto the ship. Endurance's stern post snapped, and icy seawater began flooding inside. The entire crew sprang into action. For 3 days straight, they tried pumping water out, but this was a battle whose outcome was already decided. Water poured in faster than it could be removed. The temperature was -8.5 degrees Celsius. In such cold, even standing still is difficult. Yet there was no fear or panic on the crew's faces. Some men went outside to cut away the ice, crushing the ship, but the defiled water kept rising, and ice pressure grew even more deadly. Finally, with a heavy heart, Shackleton gave the order, "Abandon ship. Get down onto the ice." The silence of that moment was broken only by cracking ice and splintering wood. Then a crew member named Tom McLeod spoke. "I don't think we'll ever make it home now." Those words floated in the air and left a cold wound in everyone's heart. More than 9 months had passed since the ship became trapped. Then came the cursed day, October 27, 1915. A sound like an explosion echoed. Shackleton turned back to see that Endurance's rear had lifted nearly 20 feet into the air. The rudder and stern posts were torn away by ice pressure. The wooden walls shattered, as if an invisible predator were chewing the ship to pieces. Water rapidly filled the front section. Thankfully, by then, all crew members were already off the ship. Soon, the front rose along with the water and slowly sank into the depths. The sinking of Endurance was not just the end of a ship, it was also the end of Shackleton's mad dream of crossing Antarctica on foot. But the real question now began. Would they survive? They had no radio, no telephone, no way to contact the world. They were stranded on a drifting ice floe with ocean currents. They set up a forced camp on it, sheltered by a massive ice ridge. First, they took stock. What remained? 3 small boats, 1 sled, some personal belongings, and only 1 month of rations. That was all. Nights were the hardest. With little space, many had to sleep directly on bare ice. To survive the cold, most slept pressed against one another, sharing body heat. But the real fear was elsewhere. The chance of any ship passing through this wasteland was almost zero. This was the Antarctic Ocean, where no human vessel wandered for months. It had been over a year since they had seen another human. The world didn't even know whether they were alive. There was no way to send a message and no hope of rescue. Shackleton had only one weapon left: his experience and belief in his skills. But the question remained, can courage and faith alone save humans from death-like conditions? When food runs out, how does a human survive in icy deserts? The ice camp was not a permanent solution. The ice could break and swallow them at any time. They needed solid land. Shackleton studied maps and calculations. The nearest refuge was Paulet Island, about 550 kilometers away, near the Antarctic tip. Ironically, in 1903, a Swedish ship had been trapped there and left rescue gear that Shackleton himself had once purchased. 12 years later, fate had turned that same gear into their last hope. Shackleton told the crew, "We will try to reach Paulet Island." Each man could carry only 2 pounds of essentials. Many had saved personal items, but Shackleton warned them, "Nothing is more valuable than your life." He himself left behind his Bible and gold coins in the ice. Photographer Frank Hurley had about 400 photo negatives, but due to weight limits, he chose only 150. Those 150 images would later become proof of this historic struggle. Food shortage soon turned terrifying. The crew was forced to kill young sled dogs, an unbearable decision, but survival left no choice. After preparation, all supplies were loaded onto boats and sleds. Each boat weighed nearly a ton. Dragging them across ice was almost impossible. But luck struck again. Antarctic summer returned, temperatures rose, ice softened, and pulling sleds became even harder. After 3 hours of brutal effort, they realized they had moved just 1 mile. The road ahead was worse. Shackleton decided to stop and wait until the ice floe drifted closer to land. They named the camp Ocean Camp. Shackleton gave every crew member a task to prevent despair, but misfortune was not finished. On November 21, 1915, pressure increased again. The ship suddenly lifted, hung briefly, then disappeared forever into the icy depths. Watching their ship vanish before their eyes left deep wounds. It felt like their last connection to the outside world was severed. Now they had nothing, only a drifting ice floe and ocean camp. For a while, things continued somehow, but soon the ice floe drifted east farther from land. On December 23, 1915, Shackleton ordered them to abandon Ocean Camp and move again on foot, but after a few kilometers, thin ice and open water blocked them. They could go neither forward nor Bakta. They set up another camp. Food became the biggest problem. Shackleton enforced strict rations, 1 biscuit per day, diluted milk, some cocoa, and a small portion of high-fat meat paste. Whenever a seal or penguin appeared, they hunted it. Rations were extremely low, but Shackleton often said, "Don't worry, enough food to keep alive." He knew the real battle was mental. Months passed. The ice drifted in the right direction. On the foggy morning of March 23, 1916, Shackleton saw something strange. As the fog lifted, mountains appeared. It was Rengvio Island. But this was bad news. They had drifted too far. Palat Island was now behind them. Ahead lay only Clarence Island and Elephant Island. Beyond them stretched thousands of kilometers of empty ocean, the Drake Passage, the most dangerous sea on Earth, waves up to 12 meters high, over 2,000 sailors lost, about 800 ships sunk. Even in 2025, ships crossing it faced terror. If they drifted into it, death was almost certain. Hunger worsened daily. Even rotting meat once kept for dogs was now given to men. Water was scarcer still. They melted ice using body heat just to get a few spoonfuls. There was also a shocking truth. Officially, the crew was 27, but actually 28. A young man named Blackborough had secretly boarded the ship. Shackleton had warned him, "If food runs out, you'll be eaten." First, by luck, a sea leopard was hunted, providing 1,000 pounds of meat. On April 7, 1916, Clarence Island appeared, but winds changed. The ice floe shrank to just 50 meters. Death stood right in front of them. Shackleton made a final decision. All 28 boarded 3 small boats. Their destination, Elephant Island. After 497 days on April 15, 1916, they finally reached solid ground. They cried, laughed, hugged, but problems remained. Elephant Island was completely deserted. Shackleton studied the map and chose South Georgia, 1,300 kilometers away. He would go with 5 men. After unimaginable struggle, crossing mountains on foot, Shackleton, Worsley and Green reached Stromness whaling station on May 20, 1916. Against all odds, rescue attempts followed. Finally, on August 30, 1916, Shackleton reached Elephant Island. All 22 men were alive. After 2 years, all 27 returned home alive, not because they reached their goal, but because they never left their team behind.